working with us on the arrangements today. In terms of the people that I have with me this morning, obviously Catherine Morgan-Wicks and Donna Adams will join the press conference as they are required, but we'll run through this press conference in the normal way with myself speaking first, Dr Veach, followed by Catherine Morgan-Wicks and then Donna Adams. And I just note and thank you for meeting the social distancing requirements as we go through this challenging period. But I firstly want to start by thanking Tasmanians in the South for their cooperation by staying at home at this critical time. I don't mind saying that I walked back to my room late last night and just noted the number of people that were on the streets, and there weren't very many, but in the main they were wearing face masks. I must admit it did fill me with great sadness walking past the businesses that were closed and noting those that were doing their very best to supply takeaways and to have pivoted, and I just want to say thank you to them for that. It's important, the steps that we are going through at the moment. We've acted swiftly, we've acted decisively with a view to ensuring that this does not get away from us, and I'm very pleased this morning to say that we have no further positive cases at this time. And in terms of close or casual contacts of the positive case, Dr Veach will provide more information, but we now have 158 primary close contacts which we're working with, which include the group that were at the Woolworths as well. But Dr Veach will provide more details of where we're at with both close and casual contacts, and also an update on the contact tracking and tracing that's underway. I'm very pleased that in the past 24 hours there have been 1,402 tests collected by the laboratory. That is a record day for testing, and I want to thank those people that have turned up. I know it can be frustrating as you wait to get a test, but please put up with that small inconvenience, get tested and help us understand where this virus is, if it is in our community. Importantly, of the tests that were carried out, 576 of these were carried out at Gage Brook and 648 at Macquarie Point, and as I've said to date, we have no further positive tests, and those that have been run through the laboratory have all been negative. Importantly, in terms of vaccination, which Catherine Morgan-Wicks will provide an update on this morning, 83% first dose has been achieved, and we're at 68% fully vaxxed and closing in on the 70%. But the next 48 hours remains critical, and ask all Tasmanians in the South to work together to get on top of this as quickly as we can. In the main, people are doing the right thing. Donna Adams will provide some further detail just in terms of the policing of the stay-at-home order. Last night there were a few police infringement notices issued, half a dozen. Warnings were provided. Donna can provide further detail on that. And there were also 45 vehicles that were turned around at our checkpoints over the course of the period since the lockdown started last night. And again, Donna can discuss that. Now, the other matter that I wanted to mention today as well, just in terms of national and international broadcasting arrangements, that overnight Public Health have worked with Cricket Tasmania, and the women's BBL games will go on as scheduled, but without crowds and with players in a COVID-safe bubble, in the same way that they have been able to. These types of sporting events have occurred in other states when a lockdown has been in place, but again, no crowds and with the teams in a COVID-safe bubble. I also want to reiterate this morning that for people who are forced into 14 days quarantine as a result of the steps that we've taken and can't earn an income because they must self-isolate, quarantine or care for someone who has COVID-19, there is support available through the $1,500 pandemic leave disaster payment, and I would advise people to go through the coronavirus website and to the Service Australia site for that, and further through the pandemic isolation assistance grants which the state government provides, which are for those who are directed to have a test or are placed into 14 days quarantine. The $250 per adult, $125 per child, capped at $1,000 per household grants are available to help those people whose income is affected if they are asked to go into quarantine or directed to have a test. I also want to announce this morning that in addition, the government will extend access to people who have lost income to the Pandemic Isolation Assistance Scheme to include people who are under the stay-at-home order currently in place in southern Tasmania. To be eligible, though, a person must be a Tasmanian resident, must have lost income due to being unable to work due to the mandatory stay-at-home order and have no pandemic-related paid leave requirements. They need to have a regular place of residence or place of employment located in an LGA affected by the Southern Tasmanian mandatory stay-at-home order. They cannot be receiving already a pandemic leave disaster payment for the same period or accessing other support mechanisms, e.g. paid leave or income support that their employer might provide. I would just make a point and a shout out to Woolworths. I spoke with their local state manager yesterday and offered the pandemic leave assistance grants for those close contacts that were being asked to isolate and have a test, some of them for up to 14 days. He informed me that their company, I think at a national level, had made a decision that they had in place COVID and pandemic leave arrangements and that all of their staff would be covered. And I just wanted to say, for those companies that have already put those sorts of mechanisms in place, thank you. I think it provides great support for their employees as we work through this, and obviously, unfortunately, he made the point that they have been through, as a national company, the challenges facing New South Wales and Victoria as well, and are well versed in these matters. Now, for information on these grants, please call the Public Health Hotline on 1800 671 738. Importantly, we also continue to work with the business community and will consider further support if necessary, as I previously said. And Tasmanian businesses that have lockdown queries, Business Tasmania will open all weekend and can be reached on 1800 440 026. Now, our aim is not to prolong this, to not be like New South Wales or Victoria, to make this as short and sharp as possible, and I'm pleased with where we are at the moment, but this is not over yet. That said, it's not lost on anyone that it's taken one individual to do the wrong thing and leave the heavy lifting to everyone else. That simply isn't on. I've expressed to Tasmania Police that the sum of the fine that this individual has received at the moment simply doesn't appear to be in line with the crime. This is a breach that has brought southern Tasmania to a standstill, and I've requested that they consider what other action can be taken against this person, as well as anyone who has been an accomplice to the escape in the first instance. I believe very strongly, in light of the circumstances that we're in, that we should throw the book at people that flaunt our rules and send a very strong signal that this is just simply not on. In this case, we have a system of good-to-go passes. The person was rejected and then still turned up and then set about leaving quarantine arrangements, and has now put southern Tasmania into this stay-at-home period for 3 days and dislocated so many people's lives. So I've asked Tasmania Police to consider all avenues to ensure that the book can be thrown at this individual. I want to urge all those in lockdown to help out contact tracers by limiting your movements and following the rules. And again, I would stress, and Donna Adams will speak about this, there were a handful of police infringement notices that were issued last night. These are warnings not to continue with that behaviour, and then a fine will apply if they do. But don't have a party, don't invite people to your house. Let's keep this as short as we possibly can. We know what happened in Victoria around AFL Grand Final weekend, and the fact that their cases exploded after that because people took the opportunity to have parties and to mix. The virus doesn't move by itself. It only moves with people. And so if we can limit our movements, be disciplined for the next 3 days, then we can get on top of this, I hope. Importantly, police will continue to do their work, and if you do breach the stay-at-home order, our expectation is, and mine very strongly, that you'll be penalised. Please also remember the basic hygiene rules. Face masks must be worn outside the home by everyone aged 12 years and older. This includes when shopping, exercising, except intense exercise, or when in a public space Wash and sanitise your hands. Again, do the small things. Get a test even with the mildest of symptoms and make sure that you keep your vaccination appointment. Importantly, vaccination will help avoid future lockdowns, and so now's the time to make an appointment for yourself and anyone over the age of 12. Let's lean into this as heavily as we can. If we do it now, we'll get our vaccination rates up. It'll protect our community, it will protect our families, and importantly, it will protect you as an individual. And I just want to, in finishing, give a shout out to the call centre last night who dealt with more than 4,900 calls and dealt, as I understand it, with all of them. And importantly, this morning we opened up the call centre from 6 a.m. and whilst they dealt with only a handful of calls after that during the period to 8 a.m, I'm pleased that the system was up and running, and at the moment the wait time is less than 10 seconds. So thank you to those people in the call centre for their work and their diligence. I'll hand over to Dr Veach to provide more information, and then Catherine Morgan-Wicks will come and provide some further information on vaccination and testing.
Thank you, Premier, and good morning. Just give you a brief update on where we're up to with the contact tracing. At the moment we have, as the Premier mentioned, 158 primary contacts on our list. That number will change a bit. It's a big jump from the 30 or 40 we had on the list yesterday. It includes around 70 people who were identified and confirmed as having been at Woolworths at a time of concern. And there's another 40 or so referrals that came in late yesterday that we'll be working through today. These are people who, upon identifying as possibly being at risk, have been asked to be in quarantine, and I expect the complete assessment of those people during today will identify some more people, for example, people who've been in Woolworths. So those 158 primary close contacts will be required to be in quarantine for 14 days. They're all undergoing testing in the first couple of days that we have after we've identified them. We've got 40 results back that are negative. We'll get some further results back today and tomorrow from tests done yesterday and today respectively. And the casual contacts, there's 19 of the casual contacts. That number I don't think has changed. And those people are undergoing testing today and tomorrow, and we'll get some results back tomorrow and Monday on them. So we haven't identified any further exposure sites, which is good news. So at the moment that contact tracing is proceeding well, and I think that quite large number of primary contacts, some of whom or many of whom will have been in the community the last couple of days, is a reminder of one of the important rationales for the lockdown that we're currently in, and which we hope will be able to ease or lift on Monday.
So can you indicate how many new referrals you're working through today that were at Woolworths?
What happens is the phones keep ringing, so as we get new referrals, we add them to our list, we work through them. So I can't really give you a precise number, because what I tell you now will be different in half an hour, because some of those people have been classed as a contact, some of them will have actually been told they're not a contact, and other referrals will come in. But we're dealing with around 40 referrals at the moment, and some of that haven't been, where the assessment hasn't been completed. Their management has been started, but their assessment will be completed. Some of those will be from Woolworths, but I can't tell you the detail until we've completed the assessment.
What do you think the tracking though? Are we looking likely to have our lockdown lifted on Monday night?
I can't comment on the likelihood of the lockdown being lifted on Monday night. It's obviously a good thing that we haven't picked up any cases amongst the contacts so far. But there's 100 or so primary close contacts whose results will come back between now and Monday. That'll be very important information in determining the next steps.
If we have more new cases by Monday night, is it more complex than than perhaps giving the advice to say that it is safe to come out of lockdown, or is there more considerations in terms of the calls coming in and that sort of thing?
The sort of things that will influence the decision on removing the lockdown or varying the requirements of a lockdown depend upon whether we pick up any cases amongst the contacts that we've identified, what the circumstances of the cases that we pick up are. Do we pick up a case who's been in the community, or do we pick up a case who's been quarantined for the whole time that they could have been infectious? And it will also we'll also take into account the information that we get as we progress through the information on whether there could be any other exposure sites or things that we've missed. So at this stage, again, we haven't got any further newly defined exposure sites, but part of the reason why I recommended we go into a lockdown was because of some uncertainty that we'd actually pin down every last primary contact. Now, the very high testing rates that are occurring in the clinic at Gagebrook and in people from the northern suburbs who've been tested at Mac Point is good news, because that could well be people who are coming forward who've got a concern they might have been somehow in contact, haven't declared themselves as a contact, but are getting tested anyway. So my strong advice to people in Hobart generally is to get tested if you've got the slightest sniffle. If for any reason you think that you could be part of the circle of the person in the case, if there are people who haven't come forward and said they're a contact of the case while they're in the community, well, we'd prefer you actually came forward and told public health that you were. But if you've got any concerns, get a test.
So
Do vaccination
by
rates-
Monday night, does that not necessarily mean that that doesn't guarantee us coming out of lockdown? I just want to clarify that.
I'm not. I will provide a rationale for the decision on Monday.
Do vaccination rates and testing rates play a role in whether we get out of lockdown on Monday?
Yes, they certainly do. If we don't have sufficient testing to give us confidence that the disease is currently missing from the community, then that counts a little bit against moving towards coming out of a lockdown. It's kind of part of an answer to Cameron's question, I think, actually. So high vaccination, high testing rates broadly, and particularly in the area around the northern suburbs, will give us confidence that there aren't cases in that community. We'll actually be wanting people in that community to be getting out and getting tested for a couple of weeks now. So wherever we go on Monday, we will still be wanting people to be going out and getting tested if they have any concern that they have symptoms.
What does the vaccination rate need to be before we can start saying that we no longer need to have lockdowns?
It's not as simple as that. We need to get a higher vaccination rate, and we'll also look at the circumstances in which a case or cases occur. This is a hypothetical, but it's a perfectly reasonable one, because people want to know when will we be vaccinated enough not to have to experience these very restrictive measures. I think that the higher the better. If we can get to 90% or even tip over 90% of eligible people, then I think that would be a level of vaccination that will give us considerable confidence, providing that coverage is even across the whole community. That would give us confidence that we may be able to have a considerably lighter touch if we have a case or cases in the community that could pose a risk. But we're not there yet. And we also look at the risk not only in the broader community, but in the community where the risk of transmission is. And I think Kath will shortly explain that there's been a great jump in the number of people getting their first dose of vaccine in the Brighton local government area just over the last several days. And that's really important, because that local government area contains one of the larger numbers of under-vaccinated people in Tasmania. We don't like this sort of circumstance to be the prompt, but I certainly encourage people who live in Brighton and anywhere where there are higher levels of under-vaccination to get out and get vaccinated, make a booking and get vaccinated.
Besides this incident, how are you going to get people in some of those outer suburbs across the state to get vaccinated?
There's a whole range of measures that the immunisation Operations Centre has been employing, both for state-funded vaccination in a lot of outreach into smaller populations, and also we've got general practice, we've got widespread availability of vaccine through pharmacists. So I think people need to know there's really no impediment to going out and getting your first dose of vaccine if you haven't had it sometime in the next few days from a very wide range of providers. So I think please do it.
Those additional primary close contacts that have been identified, are they people that have come forward themselves, or is this 31-year-old becoming a little bit more cooperative?
The referrals that have come out have been a combination of people who were approached by reaching out to them through check-in TAS. So we know they were at Woolworths, we know who was at Woolworths and checked in for the whole of the day actually, and we put out messages to them. Some of them have responded to SMS surveys to identify whether or not they were there at the time of interest, and other people have just rung in. Some people may not have checked in, and other people have rung in if they haven't.
Has he been any more cooperative about where he was during those 18 hours he was in the community?
We're basing our information pretty much on the same stuff that we had when I was talking with you yesterday.
No.
I'm not going to go into the operational details of the engagement of public health with the case.
We'll move to Catherine.
So good morning everyone. Yesterday was a record day for testing in the south of the state, with 1,482 tests conducted overall, and a record for a single mobile testing site with 576 tests conducted at Gagebrook. Macquarie Point also managed 648 tests, which was fantastic. Our previous record was 1,456 tests on the 3rd of August. Can I thank everyone for their patience and for the respect shown to our hard-working teams, our testing teams and our laboratory teams, who are working very long hours to help protect our community. I encourage everyone, if you have any symptoms, no matter how mild, isolate and get tested immediately, and then isolate until you receive a negative test result. Importantly, even if you are vaccinated, you need to get tested if you have symptoms. A second mobile testing site has been set up at the My State Bank Arena, formerly the Derwent Entertainment Centre car park, 601 Brooker Highway, Glenorchy. This will be open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. each day with no booking required. And there is currently no queue at the deck now, so if you need a test, please attend the deck. Additionally, we are continuing with mobile testing located at Chris Fitzpatrick Memorial Park, Tottenham Road, Gagebrook. Testing will be available from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. No bookings are required, just turn up and get tested. And we currently have a queue of around 40 cars now at the Gagebrook site, but we expect to clear this fairly quickly. Testing continues to be available at our fixed site at Macquarie Point in Hobart. This will be open extended hours, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. To make a booking for the Mac Point Clinic, please call the Public Health Hotline or visit coronavirus.tas.gov.au. If you do not have transport to get tested, please contact the Public Health Hotline so that we can make arrangements for you. On to vaccination. Vaccination clinics in southern Tasmania will all be open extended hours from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. during the lockdown period, and will be accepting walk-ins and booked appointments. These are located at the Brighton Civic Centre at Bridgewater, Princes Wharf No. 1, Hobart, and the Goods Shed, Evans Street, Hobart, and Moona at the Your Church site. And if I can mention the Goods Shed, which is a new vaccination site that we set up yesterday and is currently have loads of capacity. So please head to the Goods Shed. I note for PW1 that we have over 1,000 appointments which are booked there today, and there is some queuing there at the moment, which we are diverting to the Goods Shed at Macquarie Point, which has a lot of capacity for vaccination. In addition to these, a clinic will be operating at Mona in Berrydale on Monday the 18th from 9am to 5pm. A clinic will be held at the Central Highlands Community Centre in Ouse on Monday the 18th from 9am to 12pm, and New Norfolk District Hospital on Tuesday and Wednesday the 20th of October from 9am to 5pm. We are now over 68% fully vaccinated and 83% with a single dose. And pleasingly, Brighton LGA started the week at 70.3% with a single dose, and in the last 2 days this has lifted by 4%. And this has been achieved through bookings, both bookings at our Bridgewater Centre and over 250 walk-ins in the last 2 days. And we continue to be open there for the next 3 days at Bridgewater. So it'd be our hope that as many people in that community can get to the clinic and we can lift that vaccination rate up to 80% by the end of Monday. In particular, I call upon our 16 to 39-year-old males in that region to please walk in and get vaccinated. Yesterday at state clinics, the number of dose 1 walk-ins in southern Tasmania exceeded our dose 1 bookings, and we have put in the resources to continue that effort for the next 2 days. Yesterday we had 180 people turn out in Oatlands, which doubled the number booked. We had 220 turn out at the main UTAS campus, and I note that we had 15 prior to 12pm yesterday and over 200 turn up after 12pm. We had 350 attend our Bridgewater clinic. We had 462 turn out at PW1, and we had 150 turn out at our central Hobart Centre near the mall. So overall in state clinics yesterday, 2,314 people were vaccinated, which is 1,000 people more than we actually had bookings for, which is a fantastic result. Today we have 1,800 dose 1 bookings in the lockdown area, but we also have capacity in our clinics to double that with walk-ins. Again, if you do not have transport to get vaccinated, please contact the public health hotline so that we can make arrangements for you. I also have a plea for those in the north and the northwest. Please use what is happening in southern Tasmania to have a conversation with your family, with your friends and your workmates who are not vaccinated, and get them to make a booking. We have spots available now in Smithton, from Smithton to Scottsdale, so please give us a call and make a booking. In addition, if you're in St Leonards, the mobile bus will be there in the area on Monday and Westbury on Tuesday. In addition to the push in state clinics, GPs and pharmacies have delivered a record number of doses over the last 7 days, over 16,000 doses in primary care. So if you can't make it to a state clinic, you can get vaccinated at any one of the more than 200 local participating GPs and pharmacies. And if you have a dose 2 booking, please make sure you turn up for that dose 2. If I can go to a message about the north and northwest and west of the state, we have had concerns raised with us overnight from the north and from Queenstown in particular as to visitors from the southern region staying in those areas. Public Health have been in contact with every person that we are aware of as a potential risk of a primary close contact or a casual contact, and we have a quarantine and isolation regime for them, and they remain in the southern region. There is no current indication requiring the need to stand up asymptomatic testing outside of the southern region at this stage. If people have travelled from the south to another area in the state prior to lockdown, you should closely monitor your symptoms and, if unwell, isolate and get tested immediately. If you are a visitor to an area and you are not near a testing clinic, you'll need to drive to the closest testing clinic and then isolate until you receive a negative test result. And we also recommend that you wear a mask. People from the north, northwest and west of the state should not visit any of the 12 local government areas during the lockdown unless they have a permitted reason. If you have a permitted reason and enter, you must wear a mask in accordance with the rules. Medical appointments. During lockdown, it is important that you do continue to attend medical or healthcare appointments, including COVID-19 testing or vaccination, outpatient appointments or donating blood or plasma. The Hobart Blood Donor Centre is open today, and those with existing bookings to donate who are feeling well and not waiting on test results or isolating are asked to keep their bookings, please, if possible. Donating blood and plasma remains an essential activity, and travel and venue restrictions do not prevent you from giving blood if you have a booking. So to end, many of our health staff are involved in providing additional support for our communities over the next 3 days. This includes hundreds of staff involved in our contact tracing and emergency management teams and our testing and vaccination clinics, and laboratory teams who are operating for longer hours than usual to meet this increased level of demand. And I personally thank them and am very proud of their efforts.
In terms of getting out of this lockdown, what's more important, lifting vaccination rates or keeping up those large numbers of testing rates?
So, as Dr Veach mentioned before, in public health informing their advice in relation to the duration of a lockdown in particular will take testing rates into consideration. And it is critically important that we do reach that testing rate per capita, and we're watching each of the LGAs in relation to those testing rates. Vaccination rates, and noting the lower vaccination rate, particularly of the Brighton LGA that we started the week with at around the 70%, seeing those vaccination rates lift will also be a consideration for public health.
Are you expecting those testing rates to continue at the same pace?
I am expecting those testing rates to continue. So we have had a very solid 3 days. In fact, we've had a very solid few weeks in relation to testing, and I do call upon anyone that has a symptom to please isolate and get tested.
What about asymptomatic people? Should they get tested just to keep those numbers up?
So just doing thousands of asymptomatic tests doesn't necessarily help. It does depend on the actual particular case, and public health will make a call if they do need asymptomatic testing in a particular region or area.
Good morning, how are we? Tasmania Police has a statewide police response to support the compliance activities during the 3-day lockdown. We have a number of checkpoints at main arterial roads that surround the 12 local government areas that are subject to the lockdown. Over the past 16 hours, 28 people have been provided with advice regarding directions when they have left home, contrary to the public health directions. We've also had another 6 members of the community that have been issued with police infringement notices after they've been provided advice to heed the public health directions and have failed to do so. A couple of those infringement notices have been for failing to stay at home, and they haven't had a valid reason to leave their residence, and a couple have been subject to caution infringement notices for failing to wear a face mask after, again, they've been asked to put a face mask on and they've failed to heed that advice. Tasmania Police have done a number of compliance checks over the last 16 hours for those people who are subject to quarantine requirements. And at our checkpoints that are on the main arterial roads surrounding the 12 local government areas, we returned 45 vehicles during the 16 hours. Those Tasmanians didn't meet the requirements to actually leave the restricted area, and they were directed to return to their primary place of residence.
Are police seeing more people that are deliberately flouting the rules, or are people a bit confused about what's involved with this lockdown?
Tasmania Police have seen high compliance with the lockdown requirements, and generally when they are providing advice to someone who may be uncertain, we've seen individuals heed that advice and want to comply.
The Premier this morning said he would like to see the book thrown at this 31-year-old man who escaped quarantine. What are the options?
What Tasmania Police will do is we'll allow the public health response to conclude, and then we will examine all the circumstances surrounding the male's actions and activities in coming into the state. If there's other examples of offending, Tasmania Police will certainly take action.
What sort of penalties are available in this instance?
Well, Tasmania Police has the option of putting this man before the court and actually summonsing him for any breaches. And the law allows the presiding magistrate to impose a $17,000 fine or 6 months imprisonment.
Because at this stage, what sort of fine has he been given?
At the moment, he's received 2 fines of $1,557 for both of the breaches. But as I said, we'll continue to look at his actions throughout the course of his behaviour, and if there are other examples of offending, we'll certainly be seeking to investigate those matters.
There's some suggestion in the community that there might have been other illegal activities going on here.
As I said, we will investigate this male's actions surrounding the quarantine breaches, and any other offending that we identify, we'll certainly investigate those matters.
In terms of the $17,000 fine, is there any jail term attached to that?
A presiding magistrate does have the opportunity to consider an imprisonment of up to 6 months, but again, that will depend on what the offending behaviour is.
Do you agree, though, 2 fines of around $3,000 total isn't really enough considering what the damage this man has caused?
I look at it from the perspective that we've had really high compliance, and even when we've had someone that's flouted the laws and tried to enter the state without a valid pass, those individuals have then worked with public health and police to comply with quarantine requirements and keep the community safe. Unfortunately, this individual has chosen not to do that, and he's been extremely uncooperative and difficult to deal with. So, of course, we will investigate any offending behaviour and take action where we can.
Questions for the Premier?
Thanks, John.
Premier, when did you come to the decision that you would like this matter reviewed in terms of the man's circumstances and potential more serious punishments for him? When did you...
Oh, look, I've made that point in this room over the course of the last week that I've been very disappointed in the circumstances surrounding this individual. And, obviously yesterday, in arriving at a lockdown situation as a result of the activity and the fact that this person wasn't prepared to follow the law and do the right thing, I think it's quite appropriate now under our circumstances that this matter is looked into.
Do you think that people were able to identify this man and come forward with extra information after the Mercury published a photo of him? And given that he was being uncooperative, as we now know, were authorities considering perhaps publishing his image in terms of the public health situation that's going on?
Look, in terms of a public health response, no. In terms of that somebody's identity and personal circumstances is something that Dr. Veitch has obviously been very consistent on at these press conferences in terms of protecting the identity of an individual. It is unfortunate, very unfortunate, that this circumstance has arisen, but as the Deputy State Controller just mentioned, in the main, people have worked with us, and in past instances where people have arrived here without a good-to-go pass, we've taken the necessary steps. They've worked with us. In this case, this individual has chosen not to, and that has caused the circumstances that we're in at the moment.
You're probably well aware that...
Wouldn't it be considered to perhaps reconsider that, given that there is public health risk attached to it?
Look, in terms of as matters develop into the future, obviously we will learn from this. But again, in terms of what's occurred, it is very unfortunate. It annoys me, it angers me that this individual has flaunted the rules and has caused the circumstances that we're in at the moment. But we will treat each case on its merits.
Do you sympathise with those people who are feeling very angry towards this man, given that businesses have had to shut down?
Well, look, I'm one of those people that's feeling very annoyed and very angry in terms of the circumstances. So yes, I can sympathise and I can understand exactly where they're at.
Can I just ask, in terms of the show weekend, given that that's occurring on Thursday, is it likely that we might just extend this lockdown so people aren't going off to their shacks and potentially spreading coronavirus around the state?
Look, in terms of this, as Dr. Veitch has said, we'll consider matters over the next 24, 48 hours. And I'll obviously take public health advice in terms of next steps. I would hope that as a result of acting as swiftly as we have, that we would be in a position on Monday evening at 6 p.m. that we could lift the lockdown. But again, that advice will come from Public Health over the course of the next couple of days.
And do you think it's likely the show will go ahead?
Well, again, I'll await Public Health advice over the next couple of days, and we'll wait to see how testing proceeds and what the results are of that testing is over the next 24 to 48 hours.
And what do you say to businesses who may have had, fridges full of food ready to go to serve to patrons last night who are now unable to use that food, etc.?
Well, look, obviously, we have had a very different experience of COVID in Tasmania compared to other jurisdictions. This is the first lockdown that we've had since the Northwest early last year. It is unfortunate. It is something that we had hoped would not occur, but the circumstances that we're in left us with no other option yesterday other than to take the action that we have. Businesses I know some months ago were calling for a lockdown plan, and that has been available to them now for around 6 weeks. I think everybody understood that if we needed to take this action, what it would mean.
Obviously, that lockdown plan was released a few weeks ago. Public Health has been planning for a long time for the potential of another lockdown. Are you surprised that we are here in this situation now?
Look, through COVID, nothing has surprised me. And I think if you look at where the other states and territories have been, and certainly New South Wales and Victoria, the circumstances that they found themselves in, COVID has been very difficult to grapple with. In terms of the action that we took yesterday, and after having watched what occurred in both of those states and also the ACT in terms of when they acted and what they did, and then how Delta got away from them, obviously those matters have informed our thinking in terms of how we've reacted in terms of this particular instance. I think that we have taken a step that, whilst will impact on many people, in the long term will be seen to have been one that was suitable for where we are at the moment. And I would hope that, unlike other jurisdictions that have gone into short lockdowns, that we will be able to end ours on Monday as a result of dealing with it as we have.
There seems to be some suggestion that this man has not been any more cooperative as to where he was during those 18 hours he was out in the community. Is that now seen as a lost cause in trying to get any more information out of him?
Look, our contact tracking tracers will continue to obviously see what information they can elicit, but look, I've got nothing further that I can add over and above what Dr. Veach said just a few moments ago. Obviously, they'll continue to work with the individuals affected, but how much information they provide us with, I think the evidence of how they've been prepared to cooperate with us is very clear for everyone to see, and that cooperation hasn't been forthcoming.
Thanks.